All right, Boker Tov, Erev Purim Sameach. So we pick up with on Daf Lamed, and where are we? Okay, Amar Rav Chizda. So the lines up to the word Chizda. It's about 7 or 8 lines down. So we're dealing with the issue about which situations there's a knas, there's this fine for a man who rapes or seduces a young unmarried girl, and specifically the issue is about, let's say she's a woman that he's not allowed to marry either because of an isser kares or an isser lav, and the Mishnah said even so there is going to be a knas, although the upcoming Mishnah is going to say that when it's a chiyuv misa, when it's a woman that it's actually that the punishment would actually be execution in the court, he would not pay a knas. And we're going to see when we're going to sort of allude to that in a minute why that would be about. So let's take a look. So the Gemara says like this: Amar Rav Chizda hakol modim beva al hanida. But before we get to that, even though we've introduced this debate yesterday about whether a woman who it's usher to marry because of an isser lav or isser kares is a knas, everybody would agree that if the man had sex with a woman or younger or a girl when she was a nida, shemishalim knas, he does pay a fine, even though that was an isser kares that he just did. So why is that? According to the one that says it has to be a woman that he's able to marry. Okay. Hanami yesh bahavaya. So kiddushin, you can do kiddushin. A man can do kiddushin if the woman is a nida. There's a whole interesting question whether you can have nisuin when the woman is a nida. Can you have chuppah when the woman is a nida? The Ashkenazim say yes. The Sfardim, as a basic rule, say no. But that's because nisuin is all about them starting to live together, and therefore it's seen as a virtual type of a, like the fact that they're under the same roof, or they're in the same, or they're in like the man's domain, whatever it is, or a house. All of that is supposed to sort of symbolize the fact that they are now beginning their married life together, and their life and the marital life, which is about also having sex together. So therefore, if they're not able to have sex right now, she's a nida. It might not count as a woman as nisuin and as chuppah, because but kiddushin definitely works for a nida. So therefore, if the reason is that there might not be a knas when kiddushin isn't possible, kiddushin is possible in this circumstance, let alone the fact that the status is a transitory status. But even at this moment, kiddushin is possible. Okay, and according to the one that says it's not about whether kiddushin is binding, but it's about whether he's allowed to be married to her. So so of course a man is allowed to be married to a woman when she's a nida. So therefore, although a nida is an isser kares, if it's about the personal status of the person that might exclude her from knas, that is not relevant here, because the personal status of nida by no way excludes her from the concept of marriage, of the bindingness of marriage or the permissibility of marriage. Yes.
So just to get back to something you alluded to, you said Ashkenazim permit.
Really, let's not talk about that now. All right. So now the Gemara says like this: Uliafuke midrab nichuni ben Akana. And now this Mishnah, or maybe this discussion about nida, there's a question in Rashi tells us how to read this line. But one way or another, this idea that you will pay a knas even there's an isser kares, because even though by the nida her personal status is that she can be married, right? But the act of sex with her is an isser kares. So forget the issue of her personal status. Until today, yesterday we were discussing exclude the woman because of her personal status. A woman that the man isn't allowed to marry, or a woman to whom marriage isn't binding. But he was saying forget her personal status. How about the fact that the act was a violation, was an isser kares, and does that override when somebody does that type of an act the fine punishment? And here we are getting to the principle which is going to be the major focus for the next few daf, the major place in Shas where there's the focus on the concept of kimle b'derabamine, which is you establish him with the greater one, meaning you give the person the greater punishment, not the lighter punishment. So what the Gemara is doing, and it's just important to understand again this conceptual shift, it's saying until this minute we've been talking about the issue of the personal status of the woman, that maybe if a woman is someone you're not allowed to, the man isn't allowed to marry, or marriage wouldn't be binding, you would be excluded. Let's bracket the personal status of the woman. It doesn't matter what her personal status is, but in the act of rape, he also did this violation of having sex with, let's say, a nida, okay, which is not a problematic personal status, or any of the cases in the Mishnah, right? And that should be an isser kares. And that isser kares, in terms of the act, not in terms of the person, should override the punishment, the fine of the knas, based on kimle b'derabamine. And therefore, the question is, do we say this? Do we say that an isser kares overrides the punishment of the knas? Because, as I mentioned to you earlier, our Mishnah Mishnah says that you pay for that the knas exists when there's a lav or kares, but the next Mishnah is going to say the lav does not exist if there's an isser misa. So let's say the woman is what would be an example of a chi of misa. We'll have to look at the next Mishnah. A mother. Let's say it's his mother. Okay, well, his mother wouldn't be what wouldn't work. His daughter. Okay, let's say it's his daughter, right? Because mother couldn't be 12 years old. And okay, let's say it's his daughter. Okay, so therefore, in that case, okay, he wouldn't pay knas. Why not? I mean, if you pay knas, even if you can't marry the woman,
paying himself.
Let's not worry about it. Okay, fine, whatever. We'll figure it out. Anyway, if you pay a knas, even if you marry, or even if you can't marry the woman, why not pay a knas in the case where it's a chi of misa? So clearly, that's on the principle of kinle b'draba minei. That if it's an act that is deserving of execution in the court, that overrides any monetary payment. So the question we're going to focus on is fine. That's what our mission assumes when it's something that's deserving of execution. What about if it's something that's an isser kares? Our mission assumes that does not trigger kimle. So now the Gemara is going to introduce. Well, we'll see. Now the Gemara is going to introduce an opinion that says it does. Okay, so let's take a look. Ulafuke. So this discussion about nida that there will be a knas, or basically our general assumption in our mission that there's a knas by an isser kares, is coming to exclude, to reject the position of Rabbi Yomi ben Akana, who says that even in the case of kares, we say kimle b'draba minei. The Tani we turn to the Brisa. Rabbi Yomi ben Akana says Yom Kippurim k'Shabbos l'tashlumim. Rabbi Yomi ben Akana would say that Yom Kippur would be like Shabbos when it comes to having to pay. What does this mean? So there's a classic case: if you burn down somebody's haystack on Shabbos, you don't have to pay because the very act that made you liable for damages, the burning of the haystack, was an act of chilul Shabbos. And therefore, the act of chilul Shabbos overrides the act of damages. That's the principle of kimle. And you did it right. And well, that's a discussion. And chilul Shabbos is something that is punishable by execution. So Rabbi Yomi ben Akana said it would be the same thing if you burn down his haystack on Yom Kippur. Even though that's punishable by kares, not by execution, it would have the same effect of overriding the liability for payment. Okay, Ma Shabbos mitchay b'nafsho patun tashlumim. The same way on Shabbos, when you did something that you are liable for your very life, you did something that is a deserving of the death penalty, you're exempt from tashlumim. Av Yom Kippur mitchay b'nafsho patun tashlumim. Even on Yom Kippur, if you do something that is liable for your life, because kares is your soul, even if it's not your physical life. So equally, that would exempt you from payment. Now, logically, this obviously is a big jump. Besides just the fact that the idea of kimle is a big enough chiddush as it is, and maybe we only say it in the most severe cases and not in the cases that are less severe, but it's also a big jump because kimle presumably has to do with the punishments that the court imposes. That since a court is going to impose, or can impose in some cases, a punish of execution, therefore, it's sort of like I mean, it is true in American court, for example, like O.J. Simpson got off in terms of the in terms of murder, but then he was tried in civil court. Okay, but you can sort of understand, like, you got to make your decision how you want to prosecute this case. Are you going to prosecute this case as a murder trial, or are you going to prosecute this case as damages? Right? So you can sort of understand that if, in terms of the Beis Din, it's a weightier case, it's a chilul Shabbos case, it doesn't get to be prosecuted as a mazik case. Okay, so that's like one way of understanding it. But if it's something that the weightier thing is only between the person and God, it's an isser kares, then why should that be relevant for the Beis Din prosecuting the civil case? Right? Very nice that you're chayiv to kares because you were mechalel Yom Kippur. What does that have to do with us? As far as we're concerned, all we see here that's relevant for our docket, for our case, is the fact that you burned down this guy's, haystack. So saying his idea is definitely a big chiddush, not just because kares is not as weighty, but because kares isn't an issue about the court. So to say kimle in that type of a case is definitely a bigger chiddush. Now, I do want to tell you something. I might be introducing too many ideas at this stage, but might as well just get it over with, is that the idea of kimle, certainly in a case of, let's say, a capital case like chilul Shabbos, generally applies. I mean, there's debates about some of these things, but anyway, even if the chilul Shabbos, even if you're not actually going to prosecute the guy, let's say, for example, there were no witnesses, okay, or let's say they didn't give him hatra'ah, they didn't give him warning, or let's say he was shogeg, let's say he wasn't intentional in his chilul Shabbos. It could still be, or it really still is, that he still doesn't pay the fine. because since it's a type of a case of a capital crime, even if it's not prosecutable as such, we can't prosecute it because he didn't do it intentionally or there were technical issues or so on. Still, the nature of the act was a capital crime, and that overshadows anything else. But again, that's very different to say a chiv misa that cannot be prosecuted, as opposed to something which in principle is never an issue of the court and is only a chiv kares. And that's the chiddush of Reb Nechunya ben Akana. So let's take a look.
But if it was like, let's say fire camp from his, fireplace and he had nothing to do with it, then he would be
Of course, and he's not doing an act. Okay, so my time to Reb Nechunya ben Akana. What's the reasoning? Amar Abaye nemer ason bidei adam. It speaks about an accident occurring or a tragedy occurring, and that's when it happens through people, because it says imason yeh v'nasata nefesh lachas nafesh, and this actually could be one of the basis for the idea of kimle, right? It says if two men are fighting and one man smites a woman that's standing by and she's pregnant, and if lo yason, if there's no ason, then you actually pay the fine. But imason yeh, you don't pay the fine. And you rather nefesh lachas nafesh, you pay for your, with your life. So what does ason and not ason mean? So the Chazal understand that ason means that a actual, not the fetus is killed, but actual one of the adults there, one of the living people is killed, or somebody doesn't have to be an adult, but whatever. So if actually a born person is already killed, then you're not going to pay for the fetus. Then it's going to be the crime of murder, and you're going to pay with it for your life. But the important thing for us is, you're not going to pay for the fetus that gets killed in the process. Okay, that even though the miscarriage of the fetus is normally something that entails a fine, if there's a death of a person that has already been born, if there's a death in the process, then there's not going to be a fine. There's going to be a capital crime of murder. So that actually tells us the principle of kimle. So, and that's a case where a human being causes this action, this tragedy. Okay, V'nemar, and it says by Yaakov and Binyamin, ason, right? I don't want to send him down because some ason will occur on the way, some tragedy will occur. Bidei Shemayim, and that means something that happens not through human agency, but God brings it about. Okay, it's natural causes. So the same way in the case when it's a human act that was tragic, that led to a death, therefore you're exempt from payment. That's the case of a miscarriage and somebody dies. So similarly, if it's a type of a death that God brings about, a kares, a death of the soul, and when it's an act that brought that about, that would also exempt somebody from payment. Of course, it's a little bit funny because the ason in one case is not that the doer, the perpetrator, is getting this human death, the death of the court. It's that he brought about the death of another person. Whereas we're trying to apply it to a case of kares, where God is bringing about, is imposing, a death of the soul on the perpetrator. So it's not obvious. It's not exactly parallel. But anyway, that's what he says. The idea of ason here being something brought about God teaches me that even if it's a sin that is only deserving of punishment from God, of kares, of an excision of the soul, that also would be exempt from payment. Maskif Rav Bar Ava asked on this. How do you know that this ason by Binyamin, when Yaakov is warning his children, that it's referring to the type of a natural causes of cold and heat that all comes from God? Yeah, pachim. I know. You think pach means like a pit, right? Or a trap. But Rashi and Tosfos both say that it could mean that, but it also here means cold weather and hot weather. Dilma maybe it's about lions and thieves. That's something through human agency. Now you're saying, what? Lions, human agency? So what you have to understand here is that the Gemara is not just assuming that the question is whether it's a natural cause or a human cause, meaning that the basic category is human, and anything that's not human is defined as bidei shemayim, as natural. No, the Gemara is doing the opposite. It's assuming that bidei shemayim means an assumption that God is going to bring it about, some type of a providential punishment. Okay, so if something happens to you and it's bidei shemayim, it doesn't mean it's natural and it's random. If something happens to you and it's bidei shemayim, it means God brought it about. So bidei adam is seen as anything that God didn't bring about, that was just because of the natural way the world works, whether it's through human agency or through bad luck or through negligence or whatever it might be. 1 minute. So let's just get through this. So the Gemara says like this, or how do you know that that Yaakov was afraid, right? Because again, the idea of Bidei Shamayim is kares. And kares is not just natural causes. Kares is something that is a punishment from God. So how do you know that when Yaakov was commanding his kids, it was about issues of very hot weather or cold weather that would be something that God would have brought about, and therefore similar to the kares idea. Maybe it's about lions and thieves, which is something that is, again, not human agency, but not necessarily divinely brought about. And therefore, it's not the category of things that are divinely brought about that Yaakov is talking about. So the Gemara says, 1 minute. Atu, 1 second. Yaakov, aha, azir, aha, lo azir. What, you think Yaakov is saying, oh, I'm only worried about one type of tragedy, not another type of a tragedy? Yaakov, call me azir. Yaakov is warning about all types of tragedies. So when he says, lest an ason occur, I mean, whatever the reason of the ason is, whether it's something that God is bringing about, whether it's something that comes through humans or natural causes. But since his ason incorporates all types of tragedies, it also includes those that God brings about. And therefore, those are put in the same category. Okay, so now the Gemara has a fun little digression. And the Gemara says like this. You mean to tell me hot and cold weather or whatever, those are things that are like directly punishments that are brought about by God? Everything comes from God in terms of bad things that happen to us or good things. Except for global warming. Written very nicely said. Except for the hot weather and cold weather. Now, what does that mean? If anything you would say is not something under our control, besides Dove's cute comment about global warming, it would be the weather. So yes, the weather does come from God, but the effect that it has on you, that is not something that God is bringing about. So again, this might mean more like it sounds like traps and pits or whatever. But again, I understand because it talks about baderech, on the path. But the Gemara, anyway, the Gemara isn't clear. But Rashi and Tosfos are reading this to be cold and hot. Okay, cold and heat are on the path of the perverted. Shomer nafsho yirchak me'am. Somebody who's able to watch themselves, take care of yourself. You can bundle up, put on a hat if it's cold outside. And therefore don't stand directly in the sun. Go in the shade. Don't die of dehydration and then say it was God's fault. Okay, so basically, it's of course it's a funny message. So what that sort of it means is that God is not going other things you can also avoid. Right, so what does it mean that Kol Bidei Shamayim? Right, so everything else I can't avoid. So this, right? Locking up my house from the Ganavim that I can't avoid. The only thing that I can avoid is the hot and the cold. So Tosfos says, it's hard to exactly get what the Gemara is getting at. Tosfos says what the Gemara is trying to say is that if God wants to bring about a punishment onto you, right, then he can do it through all types of means. Yes, it's true. Very often bad things can happen to you because you're negligent yourself and you could have watched yourself about it and it's all your own fault or it's all random. Sure, a lot of things happen because they're random or because you're negligent. But if God wants to bring about punishment on you, then he'll bring it about through other means and there's no way you're going to escape it. God will see that it happens. Except for God will never use heat and cold as a way to direct punishment towards you. Because this pasuk teaches us that that's something that you could always take the right measures to escape, and God won't sort of override those measures. All right, so go figure that out. It's hard to exactly, get what the Gemara is getting at, but that's the way Tosfos understands it. All right, so everything God can, will use all different means to bring about divinely ordained punishments, except for tzinim upachim. That's always going to be random, and it's always going to be something that's in your hand to prevent. Okay, so that's in terms of saying, so why are you calling tzinim and pachim bidei shamayim? If anything, that's the most that's bidei adam. The two, and in addition, are you bidei adam linu? Are you telling me lions and thieves are something that is not directed from God? V'hamar Rav Yosef, doesn't Rav Yosef say, v'chein tani Rabbi Chia, yom shechar Beis Hamikdash, from the time that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, alva pisha batlu Sanhedrin, although there is no longer a Sanhedrin dealing with cases of execution, arba misos batlu, the 4 types of execution did not stop, were still imposed. So the Gemara says, lo batlu, the 4 types of court execution did not cease. Habatlulu. What do you mean they did cease? What it means is din arba misas lo batlo. The punishment that parallels the fourth, that sort of divinely ordained punishment that has come as a type of a parallel for these for these four executions did not see. So you think you're going to get out of it because there's no court around to prosecute you. Don't worry, God is going to get you in the end. Somebody who's deserving of stoning. Oh no, minagag, oh chaya dorasto. Either he'll fall from a roof because they would stone a person. They basically would throw him over a cliff. Is how the Gemara understood what stoning was, and then they put a stone on him. So either it'd fall off a roof, or an animal would trample him because then the body would shatter at the bottom. So that would be parallel to stoning. Somebody deserving of being burnt, execution by fire, which basically, according to the rabbis, would be pouring molten lead down his throat. Oh no, but here it's more literal. He would either be caught in a burning building. Oh nachash makisho, or a snake would bite him, and the venom of a snake would be like burning. Somebody deserving of execution by the sword. Onim Silamalchus is either given over to the Roman government that will execute you by the sword. Oh, least in by Malav, or thieves, bandits will come and kill the guy by the sword. And somebody deserving of strangulation. Benar will either drown in the river, so he'll choke to death.
Miva this, Miva that.
Right, exactly. This is a really curious Gemara. Or will die with some type of a respiratory ailment that he'll basically won't be able to breathe. Right. So basically, you see, it's the exact reverse of what you said. Cold and heat is not divinely directed, and ganavim and lions is divinely directed. So the Gemara says, okay. So the Gemara says, fine. Ella eifach, fine. Well, you want to reverse it. Fine. The lions and the thieves are divinely directed, and the cold and the heat is your own fault. Either way, says the Gemara, the point is that when Yaakov says v'karahu ason, he's talking not just about human-imposed types of tragedies and death. He's even talking about ones that are natural or ones that come from God. He's talking about divinely directed ones, and therefore it's all in the same category. And the same way the court execution exempts a person from punishment, then similarly a divinely ordained type of a charis of the soul will also excuse a person from punishment. Little Tosos here that asks the question of, does this really work, by the way, in terms of these divinely ordained punishments? If you look at Tosos top of here, Lamed Amud Bet, Din arba misas labatlu. Vim tomer v'hamar ba'asocher tapolim ba'hu dizakfu afal pi shayachayiv skila sheba 1 minute. No, that's not what I wanted to see. It says like this. Avakasha, the fourth line in the Tosos, the last of the wide lines from the top. Avakasha, the chazina kam avaryanim. We see a lot of sinners. The ovdei avodos kochavim. Okay, shemesim al mitoseyim, that they die, in peace. They die in their beds, happy and prosperous and so on. So this is the age-old question, right? About tzaddik v'ralo, rasha v'tovlo. So saying, what happened? Did you forget the beginning of Gemara Brachos, which spends 3 dapim trying to figure out that things don't work as nicely as they're supposed to work? So v'yesh lomo, let's see what Tosas' answer is to this philosophical, theological question that's been us with for millennia, right? So you do understand this does say something, by the way, about the nature of the rabbinic enterprise, right? So the question about nida mishalim knas and bu'ula for kohen gadol, they get this amount of space. The question for this profound religious theological question of why do the wicked prosper gets 2 lines in Tosafos. So v'yesh lomar, okay, it's a legal tradition. What do you want? V'yesh lomar da yidei tshuva hakadosh baruch hu mekil ulfami mochel legamre ozechus tololo ve'eno nifrim mimenu b'chayev. All right, you don't know who's really righteous, who's really whatever. Maybe he did tshuva, maybe he had a good deed that's being paid off. God is paying him off in this world so that he can get punished in the next world. So there's a whole bunch of cheshbonot that we don't understand. Okay, so anyway, that's your answer to that theological question. Yes.
Steinsaltz changes avodah chacham to avodah zarah.
Yeah. Actually, no, clearly. All right, so now the Gemara continues. Okay, so basically we have the idea of Reb Nechunya ben Akana, that if somebody is chayav kares, burns down a haystack on Yom Kippur, that they don't have to pay the fine. Similarly, if a man rapes or seduces a woman who's a nida, let alone a woman who's like a isser kares, like a sister and so on, but even if there's no issue with her personal status, since the act was done with in a way that he was deserving of kares, according to Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, that would override the fine, and he would be exempt from the fine. That is not the position of our Mishnah. That is the position of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana. Okay, and the question is, do you say this kimle idea by things that are divinely ordained punishments, but are not an issue for the court? So now the Gemara continues. Rava Amar Tamid Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana mehacha. The reason Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana comes from here. This seems to be a much more relevant pasuk, although it's not itself about kimle, but it does connect the two ideas of kares and misas based in. This is talking about somebody that is deserving of that did avodah zarah and is deserving to be put to death. And the Torah says like this: if the people of the land hide their eyes from this person, when he gives his child over to the Moloch, and the Levilti Hamitoto, I think is the end of the pasuk, and they do not execute him like they're supposed to, then it says, I will pay my attention to this man and to his family, or and I will excise him from his nation. So basically, God is saying, if you guys don't do your job to execute him, don't worry, but you should know that he's going to get kares from me. He's going to get cut off from me. So that's much more directly relevant. The execution of the court, the substitute for the execution of the court is God giving karet. Okay, so that's easy. If whatever is true about execution of the court is true about God's karet.
How does that apply to kimle?
Well, it's not about kimle. That's what I said. The pasuk of Ason was about kimle. This is not itself about kimle, but it is much more directly about that God's kares is a substitute for the court's execution as a general idea.
But that's only if the human beings are going to abdicate their responsibility.
Okay, so that's true. Meaning what you could say
you're
is
overlooking that detail.
Right, what you could say, right, so thank you. So that is true. What you could say is, fine. So if somebody does, like I said before, Chil Shabbos, and we don't execute him, then his divine punishment will be a substitute, and we're not going to impose the fine. But still, the sin that he did was Chil Shabbos and was deserving of Misas Basin. So Rabbi was absolutely correct that this does not prove a parallel to a case where you're only deserving of kares. This is a case where the person is deserving of a court execution, but he just isn't going to get prosecuted by the court. Okay, so that's absolutely correct. Kimle means we establish him b'derabba minei, in what is the greater one, in the greater punishment. Okay.
Interesting, we haven't seen that lashon.
I know we haven't seen it. It's the principle here, but we have not seen it yet. We'll see it. Okay. So Amatorah karet shali kimita shalachem. My karet is like your execution. The same way when you impose an execution, he's exempt from payment. Even my karet, the guy is exempt from an execution. And Rabbi Dov correctly says, what really you learn from this is that if the guy was Mechal Shabbos and we didn't actually execute him, there weren't witnesses, there wasn't warning, it was b'shogeg. Well, shogeg doesn't even get kares. But anyway, but at least there you could say whatever punishment he's going to get from God, that's parallel, and therefore he'll be off the hook. It really is not a good application to a case where the whole sin was never in the category of a court execution, was only in the category of karet, like the case of Yom Kippur, the case of sister, a brother and sister, and so on. Okay, but those are the two drashot. By the way, just an interesting parenthetical point, Ba'ishahu b'mishpachto is very interesting. That man and his family, right, the whole idea about collective punishment, right? If the man sinned, how does his family sin? And so Rashi immediately says, well, because you never have a case where somebody is not being enabled by his family members, and they know and they keep him quiet and so on. Interestingly, Onkelos translates this as that man and his colleagues, I think it says, or his supporters. I don't remember the exact terminology. There, take me look. What is it? What is it?
20, chapter 20, verse 4 and 5.
20 verse what?
4 and 5.
Begavrahu uvisa'adohi, and that man and those that enable him, those that support him. So it might be based on Rashi, but at least he's not saying that we assume that the family are his enablers, right? It specifically means those that are his supporters. I don't know. You are mishpacha, it's used in a figurative sense, right? Whatever. Okay. Anyway, all right. So those are the two drashot. Either it's learned from Ason by Yaakov, or it's learned from this case about if the court doesn't execute, God will give karet. So now the Gemara says, "Ma'ika bein Rava le'Abaye." What's the difference between whether you base it on the Ason idea or the kares idea? So the Gemara says, "Ika beinayu zar she'achal truma." if a non-Kohen eats truma and he eats the truma of a Kohen that isn't his. So in that act of eating, he is both stealing and doing a sin that is chayav misa b'dei shemayim. Eating truma is chayav misa b'dei shemayim. So now what you have to understand is that chayav misa b'dei shemayim, although if you ask me, that sounds weightier than kares because it has the word misa in it. Kares is more abstract. But Chazal understand that that's actually less weighty than kares. Why is it less weighty? Rashi says kares also implies the death of the children, whereas misa does not. Tosfos disagrees. He thinks only ariri implies the death of the children. But whatever it means, the assumption is that misa b'dei shemayim is less severe than kares. So what if it's deserving of a divine punishment but less weighty than kares? Okay, the guy ate truma that wasn't his. Labai pater, according to Bai, he'd still be exempt for payment because he learns it out from ason. So any divinely ordained punishment, whether it's kares or misa b'dei shemayim, gets him off the hook for payment. Well, Rava chayiv, according to Rava, you'd be chayiv because Rava only, it has to be at the level of kares. He learns that from a pasuk about kares. Okay. So now we've established the idea of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana who applies it by kares, and we've had a discussion about whether it's kares or does it even include misa b'dei shemayim. And now the Gemara is going to a little bit shift gears. Well, let's take a look. So the Gemara says, "Ulabai pater, are you really exempt according to Rabbi in this case of eating truma?" V'amar Rabbi Chizda moda Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana begonev chalavo shel chaveiro or chalavo chalev. What would be chelbo?
It's chalev.
Chelbo shel chaveiro, right? Chalavo would be his milk, right?
Right.
Okay, chelbo shel chaveiro ve'achalo shuhu chayav shekvar nitchayev begneva kodem sheba lidei iser chalev. So now the Gemara is putting aside for a moment the question about how weighty of a sin it has to be. Fine, kares, misa b'dei shemayim, misa b'dei adam, whatever it is. Now we're going to get into some of the really precise definitions of when it's seen that these two things, one overshadows the other. And how much do they have to be the same act or not the same act? All the cases we've been giving, right, having sex with, raping his sister-in-law or his sister, whatever it would be, the act of sex is the act that's chayav kares, and the act that you pay the fine. Burning down the haystack is the act that you're chayav for chilul Shabbos, and the act of mazik. But if they're separate acts, then you don't say one overshadows the other. Then they're two separate acts, and each one is prosecuted separately. Okay, so let's see the application of that. If somebody steals his friend's chalev and then eats it, then he has to pay. You don't say kimle, even though the eating of chalev is an iser kares, because he was obligated to pay for the fine before he did the sin of eating the fat, which is an iser kares. Okay, Alma, you see, the me'idna de agbe, from the moment he lifted up the chalev, Kanye, he acquires it, meaning, and it's the act of stealing, and he's liable to pay for it. But he's not liable for his soul. He didn't do the iser kares until he ate it. So, so the Gemara says, 1 minute, Hachanami here too. When he takes the truma from his friend the Kohen's house, he stole it, and he's chayav in payment. So, and he doesn't do the isser of that's a chayav misa b'dei shemayim until he eats it. So how do you get the two being the same act? They're different acts, and therefore there's no principle of kimle. So the Gemara says, so what we're doing is, now the Gemara gets into these fun, like crazy scenarios in order to make things happen at the same time. Your friend stuck the truma into your mouth, so you never lifted it up. And since you didn't lift it up, you didn't steal it until you ate it. So the act of eating was the act of being mazik it, and it was the act that you're chayav misa, but you didn't steal it prior. So the Gemara says, even the Kanye, when you chew it, then you've acquired it. I mean, now you could say it seems more like an act of mazik than an act of geneva, but you could also say that if it's on your body, that's like taking possession.
Right.
So the same way taking it in your hand is an act of geneva or gzela. So even if I didn't put it on my body, keeping it on my body and taking possession of it by chewing it, right, that's an act of geneva. So either it's geneva or mazik, but either way, when you chew it, then you are chayiv for payment. Well, let me just finish this sentence. But you only but it's not considered an act of eating truma by chewing. An issur, something that you're not allowed to eat, you only transgress when you actually swallow it.
Right,
so when you chew it, you've done an act of either geneva or mazik, and when you swallow it, you've done an act of eating truma. So they're not coming at the same time. So one should not overshadow the other. Yes,
No, I was just going to say. So the minute you chomp down,
yeah,
you could say that you're simultaneously causing nezik and being koneh the object.
Yeah,
but it's not a bidei shemayim issue.
Right. It's not.
You
It's not a
haven't
chiyuv
swallowed.
truma. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. So the Gemara says you still don't have it at the same time. So the Gemara says hachad ma'askinan. No, okay, what your friend did is he stuck the food into your throat, not just into your mouth, into your throat. Now, okay, so therefore the act of swallowing, the Gemara is going to assume, the act of swallowing is an act of eating. No, if the act of swallowing is forced, then you're not chai for it. But no, it got into your throat forced, but now you are choosing to swallow. So
why did your friend chai? He's the one that took it.
All right, so that Rashi and Tosas discussed. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just focus on what the Gemara is saying. And therefore, now when you choose to swallow, the exact act of swallowing is an act of mazik or geneva, and it's also an act of what do you call it? Of eating truma. So the Gemara says 1 minute. The Gemara says like this. Heichi dami, what's the case? Idamatzi lahadura, if you can't spit it out now that it's in your throat, nehader, so spit it back out. Ilo matzi ladura, and if you can't spit it out, amai chayev, why are you chayev? Now, the second part of the question makes sense, right? If you can't spit it out, if you all you can do is swallow it because physically you can't get it out of your throat unless somebody, let's say, performs the Heimlich maneuver, or maybe even not then, right? So then you can't say that I did an act of mazik, I wasn't honest. I also can't say that I did an act of eating truma, like it was all forced on me, right? So if you can't reverse it, the question is clear. Why is there any discussion of any chiyuv here? Well, if you can reverse it, what's the Gemara's question? So spit it back out. Okay, but I'm not spitting it back out, and that's exactly why I'm doing an act of eating and mazik, or eating and geneva at the same time. So what exactly is going on? Rashi says that the point is that if you can spit it back out, it seems like choosing not to spit it back out is like that very choice. I'm not going to spit it back out. That's already the act of geneva. And therefore the swallowing later, which is the act that's chayiv misa, is actually the second stage. It's not the act of swallowing that's the act of the geneva. It's the fact that I am not spitting it out.
Your friend is
you steal a watch and put it on my dining room table, and I do not do anything with it. I let it sit there.
Right.
I'm a ganav.
Maybe
that's a similar question, right?
Right.
Okay.
Basically, I'm choosing not to return it, and I'm right. I don't have to do a
physical. I won't touch it.
Right.
I'm gonna sit there.
Right. So let's see how the Gemara continues. Now, the question about why the first one isn't chayiv is because we're assuming that as long as you could spit it back out, if it's still going to be like in reasonable state, which is of course a bizarre assumption. We'll see what the Gemara's answer is. Then the first one hasn't yet been mazik it. Okay, why the first one hasn't been gonev it, I don't know, but maybe he could be a ganav and you could be a mazik. Okay, so so the Gemara says, hey hidami. So lo tricha demati ladur adeh dechak. Now the case is you could do it, but with difficulty. Now what difference does that make? So it could mean that the choice not to spit it out is simply is not considered an act of geneva. It's so going to be so difficult, right? You're not an honest, but on the other hand, we're not going to call it an act of geneva, and it's only the actual swallowing which is doing an act, which is the act of geneva. Rashi says that what it means is that even were you to spit it out, it would already be disgusting and wouldn't be worth anything. Okay, and since it would be disgusting and not worth anything, therefore you're not a ganav by not spitting it out because it's already disgusting. So of course the question is 1 minute. It's already disgusting, and also Tosfos points out, and therefore your friend already was the mazik because he stuck it in your mouth to the point that it got disgusting. So if you can't be the mazik because it's already disgusting, and he's already the mazik or he's already the ganav, so what am I chayiv for when I swallow it? What type of a chiyuv would there be? So Rashi and Tosfos both introduce this idea based on another Gemara or whatever about hanas meyav. Which means the pleasure of your stomach, which means that even if you did not do anything wrong, the fact that you actually derived benefit from something that was your friend's demands restitution. So for example, let's say I had a big pile of fertilizer in my yard, and the wind came and it blew it into your yard and it sank into the ground, it got trampled on, and now your whole crops got fertilized. You didn't do anything wrong, I didn't do anything wrong, whatever. But bottom line is, you got all this benefit from my stuff. Are you like exempt? So no, there's an idea that because you derived benefit in some way, that abstract idea, the benefit, the same way if your ball rolled into my yard, I'd have to give it back. So here your benefit rolled into my yard and I have to give it back. I don't have to give back the cost of the object, but I do have to give back some way of computing how much benefit I received from that object. I don't have to pay you for the cost of the fertilizer. I have to pay you for, assuming the dollar value on the benefit received is less than the cost of the fertilizer itself. Okay, because let's say some of it went to waste and whatever it was, right? I pay you for the actual benefit, the dollar value we put on the amount of
But if
benefit.
I benefited more,
Then I only pay you for the fertilizer. Right. So therefore, Rashi says you can't be doing an act of mazik. It was already mazik and ganav because a guy stuck it in and was already disgusting, and you're not doing any damage to it. But when you swallow it, even if you receive benefit from something that belonged to your friend, so therefore,
what does the other guy pay? Nothing.
so the other guy also is chayav, but maybe
guy.
he's ran away and you can't prosecute him. I mean, there could be multiple people you could bring to court for the same thing. Okay, so we're not going to worry about that. That's a Baba Kama discussion. All right. So anyway, so therefore you should pay for the benefit, but that will be overridden by the principle of kimle. But the reality of benefit only comes about because it went into your stomach, okay? So we've created a scenario where you're choosing to do an act, you're choosing to swallow, you didn't have to swallow, but there's no mazik and there's no liability that could be talked about until it went down into your stomach, and there's the liability of deriving benefit.
By me choosing to swallow this true, I am chayav mitzvah b'dei shamayim.
Right,
Choosing to.
exactly.
Because it's idea.
Even though it's idea the chak, right? Okay, so. Okay, Rav Papa Amar, it's liquids of truma. Why does that make it any different? So Rashi just says liquids are basically the same idea, that liquids are stuff that is disgusting as soon as you put it in somebody's mouth. Nobody wants to drink anybody else's, regurgitated liquid. So therefore, there's not going to be a chiyuv of mazik or ganav at that stage. It's going to be the friend that's going to have the chiyuv, but you're going to swallow it. And at the time of swallowing, then it's an act, when it hits your stomach, there's the issue of deriving benefit. And that a payment that should be appropriate for that. And then there's also the act of achila, and those two come at the same time.
And where are we trying to? What was like a broader question that we're trying to answer?
We're trying now. We gave a scenario of kimle with a chiyav misa b'dei shamayim of truma within the discussion of Rabbi Yomi ben Akana that you say kimle even by kares, even by non-misas based. But what this has now allowed us to do is get onto a new topic. And the discussion of the new topic is, when do you say that the two acts are really one act and one overrides the other? And when do you say that they're distinct? And right now, the Gemara has identified them as being distinct if they come at separate moments of time, even if they're only separated by like a split second. Okay, but even if the one like flows from the other. Okay, they're still, as long as they're separate places on the timeline, they're considered distinct, and you don't say kimle. Dov, you had a question?
No, hold it.
Okay. Rav Papa Amar, we just did that. Rav Ashi Amar, no, you gave it the chance. Rav Ashi Amar, Bizar she'achal truma mishalo, v'kara shirayin she'chaveiro. Okay, completely different story. You're not mazik by eating the truma. What you are doing is, the truma is your truma, okay? Some Kohen gave you truma, whatever you were planning on selling it, it's your truma. But as you're walking down the street and you're chewing your truma, and you're at the same time, you're ripping your friend's nice silk garment, okay? So therefore, that happens at the exact same time. Now, this answer seems completely bizarre, because it's like, okay, you're shikayach. You manage to get them happening at the same exact point on the timeline. But they are two completely different acts, right? They're two completely unrelated acts. So give me a break. If I had to choose which one more, I would say the principle of kimle and one thing overshadows the other. It's this case of chewing and swallowing and whatever, where it's all part of the same process, even if they're not at the same point of the timeline. Rav Ashi seems to feel that no, that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that they happened at the same second. If they happened at the same second, even if I'm doing one thing with my left hand and one thing with my right hand, with this hand I am turning on the lights on Shabbos or Yom Kippur, and with this hand I am going at and breaking a vase, so they're happening at the same time, or with this hand, with this mouth I'm eating truma, whatever, then that exempts me, even though they're completely different acts. Okay, very bizarre position. Really takes that the only criteria is that they happen at the same moment in time.
What's nice about that is that no other third parties involved, like the guy stuck it into my mouth. In other words, you're totally
right. It takes you away from the absurd cases of the Gemara before. But yes, as a way of describing this case. But conceptually, to say that we would apply kimle when you happen to be doing two different things at the same time is the idea of kimle is hard enough. But it's one thing to say, if I go ahead and burn down a haystack, you, the court, has to decide how you're going to look at this. Are you going to prosecute this as a capital crime, or are you going to prosecute this as a civil crime? Okay? If I'm doing two different things at the same time, why should one override the other? Yeah. Right? All right, so let's take a look. Gufa. Now we're going to get into this. We're going to go a little bit further. Okay? Amar of Chizda, Moder Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana begonev chelbo shel chavero v'achalo shu chayav shekvar nitchay b'gnei v'kodem shebali de yisur chelev. Okay, when they happen, again, if you stole it and then you ate it, there are different points in the time, and therefore you are off the hook. So, or not off the hook, actually the opposite. You don't take kimle in your chayav. Lema pliga to Rabbi Avin. Let's say this argument on Rabbi Avin. Rabbi Avin, Damar Rabbi Avin, hazorich chaitz. If somebody shoots an arrow, mitchilas arba. It's funny it says hazorich, not hayora. But anyway, hazorich chaitz. Mitchilas arba was sof arba. From the, I think it's an arrow. Anyway, maybe. What? Yeah, okay. From the beginning of the 4 amot to the end of 4 amot, to traverse this 4 amot in Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos. And in the traversing of the 4 amot in Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, it tore through somebody's beautiful garments right along the way as it was flying in midair. So the halacha is pater, you're exempt. We say kimle, and the chi of Shabbos overrides the tashlumim. Why? Even though the chi of Shabbos only came later when the arrow landed, nevertheless, shakir tzarach hanachahi. So because the picking up of the arrow is part of the process that leads to it being put down. Okay, so meaning now the obvious point about how this is different is going to be it should be obvious. If anybody knows Hilchos Shabbos, the key functions are the key components of an act of carrying is akira, picking the object up, traversing it 4 amot from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, and then putting it down. So what it's saying is, even though the aveira doesn't end until the arrow lands, when did the aveira start? When the arrow was picked up, right? When it was shot. Right, you need both. You need that whole process to be considered the Ma'aseh Aveira. So you don't look at the end of the Ma'aseh. You look at the whole Ma'aseh Aveira. The whole Ma'aseh Aveira incorporates the time in the middle when it tore the clothes. Okay, so that's a very logical position. It did occur at the same time, at the time of the process of the Aveira. But the Gemara thinks that maybe any physical thing that's a process, even if it's not legally the same process, should be the same. So the Gemara says like this. Here too, why don't we say the same idea? When you picked it up and ate it, the picking it up was for the purpose of eating it. All right, now that's obviously very different. That's saying, okay, in practice, it's one process, but legally, it's obviously different things. Okay, but the Gemara is saying maybe we should say, since the picking it up, when you pick it up and put it in your mouth, we'll see that all is the same process. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, you can't compare the two. There, first of all, physically, you cannot put it down unless you picked it up. Again, that's not even yet saying it's legally the same act. It's just saying that you physically can't do the end without the beginning. Here you can eat something without picking it up. You could just crouch down and eat it on the ground. You don't have to pick it up. Inami. Okay, so that's one difference. One difference is that it's only when it's an act that actually the first part was a necessary part of it, not when you happened to pick it up, but you didn't have to. Inami, or what is probably the better answer, hasam ibai lahadure lo mati mahadarla. Actually, even this isn't the same answer. There, if you wanted to retrieve it, you couldn't retrieve it. You couldn't stop the arrow in mid-flight. Here, after you pick it up, you could stop it in the middle. So actually, it's quite interesting because the two answers the Gemara said, neither of which are the simple sense of the statement. The simple sense of the statement is that when it comes to Chilul Shabbos, the act is not just defined by the end of the process. The act starts by the beginning of the process. The legal Aveira, the legal definition of the act of the Aveira began at the beginning of the process. And therefore, anything in the middle is part of the Ma'aseh Aveira. But the Gemara is bracketing the legal definition and just focusing on the physical reality. Sometimes you have something which is seen as as one continuous process, and therefore anything in the way would also say Kimle. But the Gemara says that would only be under certain circumstances. Either the beginning part was necessary to get to the end, not legally necessary, but physically and practically necessary, or that when the process began, it couldn't be interrupted. Then you can say, so if you had a string attached to the arrow and you could have pulled it back, it would be different according to this. Or if you were walking in Rosh Hashanah in 4 amos, then it would be different because you could have chosen to stop in the middle. Okay, so it's not about the legal definition. We do concede that there will be a physical thing which we'll say is one continuous process, and you'll say kimle, but that's only if the beginning is either necessary or that the process cannot be interrupted. Let's just read one more line. So the Gemara says like this: "My iga bein haylish and lahaylish." What difference would there be which way you say it? So ikabenayu, what I just said, a mavir sucking b'shus Rabbi and v'kar shirayim balicha. So you're actually walking a knife, not shooting an arrow through b'shus Rabbi on Shabbos, and you're tearing these nice fine garments. According to the one that says that you can't put it down without picking it up, here too. you can't have the end of the process without the beginning of the process. You've got to pick it up, or else you'll never transport it for Amot and Rishut Harabim.
But you don't have to have a hanacha because you can walk around Rishut Harabim the whole time.
But you did have hanacha, which made it a chol Shabbos. But according to the idea that it's one process because it can't be interrupted, because once you start it, it'll necessarily finish. Here you could interrupt it. Okay, so the Gemara seems to be, both answers are about the physical reality of defining one process, either because it can't be interrupted or because the beginning was just practically, physically necessary. Although personally, I would rather say that the first answer that says Iyashar lakira below hanacha is more of a legal point. That legally it's not considered an act of carrying something in Rishus Harabim unless it has the first part of it. And therefore, anytime where the beginning of the process is part of the Masa Avera as halachically defined, then we'll call it all one process. But if it's not part of the halachic definition of the Masa Avera, we will not. You had a question?
Yes, if I understood you correctly, you said that the Avera begins with the initial action.
By Shabbos, yeah.
Right, by Shabbat. So what about the concept of Gemar Malacha? That there's no chiyuv until it's a Gemar Malacha?
No. So that's exactly the point. You're not chayiv until it's done. But the process begins when you...
you're not chayiv. I misunderstood that. You're not chayiv once you...
No, but the legal beginning of the process, if I put something in the oven, I'm not chayiv until it cooks. Right. Okay? But the Ma'aseh Aveira began from the time I put it in the oven. We don't say that the Ma'aseh Aveira I did when it cooked. Okay? The Ma'aseh Aveira began from the time I put it in the oven. It's just I'm not chayiv. It doesn't finish until a certain point. But the legal definition of the act of the Chil Shabbos was the putting it on the fire, and then so you cannot do a Maseh Hotza'ah.
Fine. If you put the bread in the oven 5 minutes before Shabbos is over, the Maseh Aveira started on Shabbos.
Right.
It doesn't finish cooking.
So there's a machlokas about that, because anyway. But the basic point is that when the Gemara says Akira Tzorach Hanacha, is it speaking about the physical aspect of it, which it sounds like from the Gemara, or is it talking about the legal aspect, which I think makes a lot more sense? That if legally this is part of the Masa Aveira, the Akira, then obviously we're going to see it as one continuous act.
What time are we learning tomorrow on Purim?
7:30. But Stephen says at the end we're ahead, so we won't have a problem finishing it out.
Early meetings at 6.
Right. But Stephen says it'll be done by 7:30.
How many you're gonna go to early?
We'll be finished by 8:15.
We'll go from 7:30 to 8:15.
Go anywhere. No, I'm not going to go to Beit Tonight I go to Beit Everybody needs to eat fast.